Welcome, my fellow MERP enthusiasts, Iron Crown Enterprise searchers, and Middle Earth fanatics, fellow members of the RPG Brigade, and Sundere. Welcome to another installment of my revisitation of Iron Crown Enterprises MERP, or Middle Earth role-playing game system. The original. Yeah. Recently I had the opportunity through a fellow brigader giving me the information to the history of ICE and its ups and downs and what had happened to the MERP system. I knew they were having some troubles back in 2000. It was petering out or running down. They were in financial situations, and you don't as a collector and stuff at the time, I wasn't really paying all that much attention to it. I was focused on other game systems that I had that was dominating my interest at the time, and I was continuing to bring out Iron Crown stuff whenever. What is that? Sorry about that. Iron Crown Enterprises stuff as it came out, mostly MERP. I did get into a little bit of Rollmaster, but not so much, and partly because I had so much D&D stuff that it easily translated over, so I didn't need to have gobs and gobs of things. I used to nick myself yesterday when I shaved. That's probably being a chubby guy, right? Whatever you do. Anyhow, this particular one is a adventure module. It's a fantasy role-playing adventure module from J.R. Tolkien's Middle Earth called The Forest of Tears. Sorry, it's prints backwards. There's not really any way for me to reverse it in this particular venue. Anyhow, the best I understand, and I've never run this one. It's a tie-in with the Herod and Far Herod's source books, trying to expand an area of Middle Earth that was covered very, very, very briefly by J.R.R. Tolkien, unless it was in some of his personal notes. We know the references because this is where the Southrons and the Easterlings were pouring in to the west from over the centuries and the millennia. The region is dominated by Sauron's people to a certain degree. Don't quote me on this, but I think one of the Nazgul originally originated from this neck of the woods and was a king in his own right for a number of centuries until he became a lackey of the Dark Lord. Anyway, so they have this nice little thing on the back here where it says, explore the sun-speckled twilight beneath the boughs of the Forest of Tears. Miss the songs of brilliantly feathered birds. A small people struggles with its insane gods, fighting to keep the traditions of its age-old society intact. Obsessed with secrecy, the Honin are troubled by a cannibalistic spirit preys on the worshippers, and the Tavari seduced by Sauron's promises of power. These dangers threaten visitors to the mysterious Forest of Tears. There's a little bit of a picture there on the back. Much smaller piece of a bigger picture map. Here's a nice color vision of the large city-state that's the largest city in the region. Slightly larger map here, and talking that's right, part of it anyway. Like I said, these sort of game modules, especially with the ICE stuff, they go into great depth of the history and religion, social structure, the powers. The stuff you need for a good, solid story and background for, if nothing else, for characters. So if you have a player who wants to create an exotic character, a character from an exotic land per se, and he's struggling or she's struggling with coming up with a good backstory, you could pull one of these off the shelf and go, hey, read this, look up on it, and maybe base some of your backstory from this particular group or culture or what have you. Of course, that works only if you're translating over. So unless you're playing in MERP, you could rework some of the verbiage so that it still plays out in your particular game system and world of choice. So, as typical of these guys, they do get a lot of visual aids and pictures, maps, charts, so on and so forth. Rollmaster loves its charts. So do I, to be honest. It's just a convenient way of dealing with the day-to-day running of mechanics. Anyhow, what we got here is even for MERP, one of the more odder modules as far as I'm concerned, because you're dealing with an area of the little corner of Middle Earth where very few people tend to go for good reasons. It's populated by a secretive, rainforesty type people who don't really want you there in the first place. And there's some pretty exotic wildlife and flora and fauna here that you got to worry about. So, for the most part, it's not loaded with huge ruins and bandit hideouts and trading posts and so on and so forth. So you kind of have to have a good reason to go there. So one of those reasons in here is part of chapter 4, or the adventure, the hidden shrine, is the tale of the herb seller's footpath. So although the forest here holds many dangers, also a source of livelihood for a fair number of our Heredum, trappers, woodcutters, and herbalists journey every day into the eaves of the wood in search of plants and animals found nowhere else in the land. So there you go. If you're looking at a low to mid-level group of players who need to get some experience, and you're running to do something a little less dungeony or hack and slashy thing, I mean, there's going to be plenty of bloodletting and fighting and defending themselves and so on and so forth. But perhaps their main thing here is to go into the forest to collect some rare herbs, rare animals or plants or insects or something that has some significant value, if not to the open market, to some sort of patron who hires them to go do this thing. And there you go. There you can have an entire adventure or a series of adventures that doesn't necessarily involve intentionally running around hacking and slashing humanoids and goblins and orcs and bad guys and so on and so forth. But hey, whatever your cup of tea is, right? And so they go on into depth about the NPCs, the locals. They give you the setting. Some traps and other things that somebody set up. Here's a map showing that the herb seller's pathway that he takes, and some of the traps that were set by the natives to discourage people or to outright kill them to keep them out of their neck of the woods. So at some point they run across this hidden shrine, and we got a good picture of that there, and quarters of the storehouse, the shrine, to go into descriptions of the various locations that are here and what the shrine's about, the task, aids, obstacles, rewards. Maybe I want to touch on that section for a minute on the rewards. As a GM, as a player, I've played with some GMs that have the Monty Hall mindset or Santa Claus, where they unload just huge dragon-sized hordes of wealth and loot onto player characters, and with no regards to the reality or practicality or the reasonableness of what that's going to do. And the players tend to, and this I've seen this in even veteran players, they get into this we're entitlement kind of mindset where they get actually upset if they don't see a really big haul, at least every once in a while. And at the same time, we've had some discussions on the brigade about this in the past several months about the economy of a given game system. I mean, in Lord of the in Middle Earth, they still use 10 bits of tin, then copper, then silver. So your market, if you go into a small village, the odds are a single gold piece is going to pretty much cash out the entire, local economy. Anything over 20 pieces is definitely going to be much more than a village of 100 or less people can handle, because a lot of them are still using the barter system. If you look at the medieval system, medieval economy, some of this stuff's based off. So, when I look at the rewards and they don't give you a whole slew of things, modest amounts of stuff, like, deal slightly ahead since he turns about 25% profit once his costs have been calculated, Receive a fair amount of material gained from this endeavor. The reward from the herb seller added with treasure they may find at the shrine with stump style for some time. A merchant, by the by, will be more than happy to give his reward in the form of herbs from his stock, trading them against the silver at 20% less than their normal value. The final possible reward comes if PC chooses to befriend. See, now we get into other categories of rewards, and this is something that I've tried to leaven most of my games over the years with. What is that? The the connections or the perks of helping a certain individual or a certain group of individuals. If your PCs go into the employment of a wealthy merchant later down the road, they can use this merchant as a contact for further stuff or to move their own loot and materials that they've gained from other adventures. The same thing goes from landowners and even peasants. If you endeared yourself, your characters have endeared themselves to a farmer or even a small village or community, and that is a good fallback place for them to go when things go south and they're down on their luck, or if they're in badly need of some R&R. So, because the adventuring is taking its toll on them. It's just my opinion on that stuff. Anyway, so we got the encounters and the good guys, the bad guys. This one's a bit of you gotta kind of be there for this one. I mean, it's not your run-of-the-mill hack and slash, right? So number 5 is the Tower Adventure number 2, which is chapter 5, Tower of the Birds. Among the people of our heritage, there have always been fanciful tales of the Forest of Tears that were put down to nothing more than superstition. Stories told by old aunts and veteran foresters in the taverns place all manner of sprites and demons in the wood when they do mischief on the poor man who should stumble upon them. Most terrible of these is the tale of the Tika, the Birdman, a flying man-shaped monster hunts for the heads of folks, i.e., the cover showing this feller. All right, another sketching of him. So, why you would want to hunt one of these things down for, I don't know. This is in this particular tale, they've been hired to retrieve a lost amulet that belonged to somebody's beloved, and it was supposedly taken by one of these birdmen. I imagine there would probably be a small market. Who knows what kind of exotic materials you could get out of something like this. Then there's the possibility of people in their private zoos, circuses. And there's a word there. I know the word, but I can never ever pronounce it. Menagerie. Right. Blah. Sorry about that. I got issues with my verbiage. What can I say? Glad I'm not writing this freehand because my handwriting is horrific. Too many years of typing. Then we got the setting. The Tower of the Birds sets in a clearing. Blah blah blah. Then you go into the torrent mill, go in there. There's a magical item here called the Rod of Birds, a 4-foot staff, primary emblem of Eno's rank. He uses it other staves, blah blah blah. Yeah. Dragon is some kind of religion. The temple city of Pred. The Tale of Morican. That'd be chapter 6. The next adventure, the city of Pred. Right, much of a city, really. It's a ruined city. All of the Incans of the central Mexican peninsula or something. Mayans, right? The Temple of Suzesh. There's a nice go-to if you need to come up with an arena or a temple or something like that on the fly, and you don't want to spend a lot of time hammering it out yourself. A lot of detail in there. Breaks it down. Nothing wrong with that, right? Always good stuff. Some of these modules and stuff I'm less enthusiastic about it than I am the source books because they just don't have as much in them. But there's always gemstones. There's always good stuff here if you want to. Like I said, once again, there's always things like the Beast table and the NPC table that's useful in other game systems. It just translated over. On a side note, I think one of the reasons some people had problems with the combat systems or weapons in general, weapon usage in MERP, was that they were not unfamiliar with the Rollmaster system, and you had offensive bonuses, the OB, and the defensive bonuses, the DB, and sometimes it confused people because some weapons had both, some weapons only only had the offensive, the OB, the offensive bonus. They didn't, and so on and so forth. So you had extra sets of numbers to keep track of, extra modifiers and things like this. And then when you couple that with the D20 system, you start getting this. Well, I rolled 250. How can you roll 250? And, well, that's the kind of the point of the D100 system. Now, 250, but if you divided that by 5, this is 25. I rolled 25. See. Now that's where the difference between it and the D20 system. Well, I have enough modifiers and stuff, or negative modifiers, to make that I rolled 20, I got a 25, but, my negative modifiers reduces it to 15, so 250 to 150. So, and then they say, well, you can't, on a D100, you can't miss 150 or 250. Well, it can if there's a negative 120 modifier, for a combination of different things. So it is doable. It is no different than the most dice systems that they use. It's just a matter of being used to the mechanics and applying them. And there was reasons why Rollmaster was mechanic heavy, and that was because that's what the people at the time wanted. They wanted a lot more freedom from having to decide on how to interpret something, but they also wanted in exchange a lot more freedom, creative freedom in designing and world building. So that was one of these early game systems, the early renditions. Now over the decades, I.C.E had revised their Rollmaster. I think they were getting into, I think the stuff I read this morning said a 5th version of it at one point back in 2002 or something like that. So, and as far as I know, that's one's still cranking it out there, right? So it's just like AD&D 5th edition. Everything keeps trying to evolve into something newer or better, or taking into account a lot of stuff that we and you, the players, the enthusiasts, the game masters, have concocted over the years. This system works great, but if we tweak this and it sounds better, and then we share it with other people, and then more and more people do it, then the game people say, hey, there must be something to that. Let's go ahead and make that adjustment, or let's include that modification in the rule book, the next generation of rule book. So it's just how the basics of that sort of thing works. And I don't need to tell you that because most of you guys and gals already know that stuff, right? Okay, well, this is already starting to run long, so I will go ahead and call it a quits and remind you that Middle Earth is a good system in any of its incarnations and has lots of flavor and color to it. If you can opportunity to acquire these things, they're still out there in some degree, although I guess there's a reason why you can't get a lot of this stuff from like drive-through, because the Tolkien estate squashed it before the movies came out. So there's whatever's out there is available through other people like myself and other players. So you might find some websites from fan-based people who've scanned PDFs of these things, and if you can get them, grab them. Every now and then they'll pop up on YouTube, on eBay, and on Amazon. I'd buy them. If you can get a good deal on them, knock your stuff out. There's some good stuff in these. Some of these are very useful in other game systems. That's just my opinion, and that's the way it is. On to the next show, right?